As much as I love to have a variety of engines to tear down on this channel, some engines just part out better than others. You got to pay the bills. And if you own a car with one of these engines, you know all about paying bills because you likely have a lot of them. This is a BMW N26. It's essentially the same thing as the N20, it's just 6 more. It is a 2-liter direct injected turbocharged 4-cylinder that you can find in 328s, 528s, X1s, X3s, probably other cars, X2s. I don't like them. In fact, I've torn down 2 of these engines on the channel and they both had the exact same failure. Can we make it a hat trick? I hope not, because the part that was bad on those other 2 teardowns is the most expensive part out of this engine. The cylinder head is worth about $700 or $800. It's quite a lot for a core engine's value, so hopefully I do okay on this engine. I bought this engine with a Googleplex of other cores, so unfortunately I don't have a story, I don't have the details on this engine. I can tell you by looking at it and reading some of the date codes and some of the part numbers and stamping that this is out of an F33 series, probably a 2014 328 if I were to guess. And the N26 just signifies the super low emissions, the ultra low emissions, whatever you want to call it. It is the low emissions version of the N20. Now, this core came with a DME or an engine control module, and sometimes, not always, and usually not on the later ones, they will put the last 7 of the VIN number on the back side of it. So in the event that I can find a tag on that, I will do my best to decode that, and I will have that information maybe somewhere in the video. These engines don't really have the best reputation. For starters, they make less power than some versions of their predecessor. These engines produce 240 horsepower, whereas some versions of N52 make over 250 horsepower. These engines are also loud and they're buzzy and they vibrate and they're nowhere near as smooth and refined as a traditional 6-cylinder BMW, which coincidentally sold a lot of cars for BMW. These engines are also nowhere near as reliable as the predecessor, which is why a lot of people compare the two and think of these engines as a step backwards. Now, like a lot of things, the early versions are much worse than the late versions. So the early ones are prone to all kinds of issues, but BMW sorted all those issues out when they replaced these with the B48. The very first thing I want to do is see if this engine turns over and how it feels. It has some noise to it. And parts are falling off already. I don't really hear any loose Uncle Rodneys in there, but it's making bad sounds from the timing chain area. The next first thing I'd like to do is pull the coils so we can pull the plugs and take a look. To call these plugs dark would be an understatement. Nothing's bent or broken or regapped. The plugs are in physically okay condition, but they're not the nice light tan that you normally like to see on these engines. Pretty dark and dingy, so perhaps it was chewing on some oil or running a little rich. Now it is time to remove the DME or engine control module. Now these are worth more than I paid for this engine. So when I saw this engine still had one, it was a no-brainer to... That's a pun. It's a no-brainer to buy. See what I did there? Sorry, guys. Couldn't resist. This is about the most useless tool I think I've ever found in this place. Let's see, moment of truth. Will we get a VIN off of this? Nope. Now, I don't have any rigs to plug into these to program them, but if I did, I could probably pull the VIN and miles off of it. That might be a thing for future Eric. Now I'm going to take a minute and work on this harness. A lot of these have broken locking tabs, and it's kind of a shame because the harnesses are worth money, but not with broken locking tabs. I'm still going to be kind of careful with it. I guess we didn't need that. Now the fact that this has a harness and a DME tells me that the whole car was dismantled. This is not a core engine out of another car. This is an engine that condemned the car, and the car was essentially dismantled and scrapped, which is kind of sad. Or maybe it isn't, I don't know. Hey, we're making progress, I think. It feels like we're getting places. All right, well, that harness is loose. This harness is ground away, I think. And then there's more stuff. All right, that's harness number 2, or well, 3 technically. I think this one is supposed to come off with the intake manifold. And I'm still not done. Don't know how this part comes off, so we're just gonna pull that with the intake. What is this? It's part of the oil filter housing or upper radiator hose connection. Now we can unbolt the intake. Let's see, is there any support underneath it? I don't think there is. And the intake and the 4th harness is off. I'm just glad they made the electrical system simple for a 4-cylinder. Let's take a look at these intake ports. They're not super grody. They're not super clean either. These engines can get pretty dingy. You guys think this thing has had a walnut shell blasting? Ooh, that one's wet. You think this one's been serviced? Or do you think it's just got lower miles? Now we're going to work on the other side of the engine, and we're going to start with the electric water pump. Well, it still has blue BMW coolant in it. While we're here, we'll get the motor mount arm. Or not. Nope. Battery dying. It's pretty tight. Now it's time for all the oil and coolant lines on the turbo. There's oil feed. Will this come off easy? Oh yeah. Oil return. I need blue for the coolant lines. This one, on the other hand, is that going to be easy or difficult? The wastegate is in the way. All right. I think we're ready to unbolt the turbo. We still have a bracket right here though. Need to get that undone. Oh, this is in the way. Oh, it doesn't like that one. Oh, it feels unhappy. Let's keep going.
Oh, that's bad. Someone's been here and doing bad stuff.
All right, now the turbo should come off. I think. Right? Right? Oh, I missed a 13 right there. Oh, it's much easier when all the bolts are out. And the turbo is off. Let's take a look at this turbo. First thing I noticed, its wastegate actuator is broken. N26s always have an electronic wastegate, whereas some N20s do. Some of them have a mechanical wastegate. It does not turn over that well. There's no shaft play, but it doesn't really turn over that great. Let's see here. There's not really a ton of damage to the impeller. I think it's a good buildable core, but I definitely wouldn't sell it as good. Now we're gonna work on stuff on the valve cover, top end, fuel system. We gotta get this bracket out of the way. Now, the fuel system is one thing that is unique to the N26. It has all hard fuel lines. Now we can unbolt the fuel rail. And now the fuel pump. And while we're in the neighborhood, the injectors. Now there is a special tool that you use to get these injectors out, and for some reason I'm better with one hand than the other. And sometimes you can do it from a different angle, it's a little different. Can't tell whether that's water. Nope, that's fuel, and that could be from when I pulled the lines off. So none of the injectors look damaged, and I didn't think we'd find any damaged injectors because the plugs all looked okay. Unfortunately, these don't have a ton of value. They're worth a little bit, but not a ton. Start working on the valve cover. Now it's time to start unbolting the valve cover. Before we start prying on stuff, let's remove this vacuum pump. Nope, we need blue for that one. And now it's time to see what's behind the valve cover. Oh. So now is a good time for some history. When the N20 first came out, BMW started offering maintenance plans with their vehicles, and as such, to control cost, or in a terrible manner to control cost, they suggested the oil change interval for these engines to be every 15,000 miles, and it appears this engine has stuck to that regimen at best. So I'm not going to say this is the worst one I've ever seen. It's certainly not the best. I think some of the other BMW engines from this era that we've torn down have looked far better than this. But one thing stands out quite a bit that I know some of you BMW guys are going to be completely shocked about. It's got a broken timing guide on a BMW engine? No way. So when pieces of the timing guide break off, guess where they go? I'll give you a hint. It's not where it's supposed to. The other thing I noticed looking at this thing, there's some moisture on the cam lobes. And one of them, this one here, this rear one, has some damage. Now, I don't know that that would cause a ton of issues. And I don't know where this engine came from. So I don't know if it's stored outside, inside. That's the first sign of moisture I've seen inside the engine where it's not supposed to be. And I think that's probably an after thing after this engine was pulled from the car. But that is a problem. Now we're going to see what the oil filter looks like, maybe, if there is one. You never know with these engines. Sometimes they pull that stuff. Oh, there's a filter there. Oh, and it doesn't look good. Yee. So I made an effort to get this cleaned out a little bit. The oil doesn't look particularly sparkly, but there are some bits in here that are a little concerning. The fact that this filter is kind of like squished together tells me that it's been in there for quite some time. Bye-bye flashlight. Next, we'll remove the oil filter housing. And we just leaked a whole bunch of oil. I think that gasket's been changed because it looks like it's in pretty good shape. Next, we're going to take a minute and strip the front of the engine and pull the crank pulley. Okay, just give it a little tap. Now we have these cam sensors we need to remove. That was good. Now the timing chain tensioner. Looks okay. Get this hose removed. Let's get blue for this task. I'm sure this is not going to break it. Easy. Continue on the timing system here. There is one more here, but it's not connected to anything. We're still going to go through the motions. Those little covers give me access to bolts or pins that hold the timing cassette in place. And it's gone. 2 more bolts here. This doesn't seem to be attached to anything anymore. It's fine. Next, we're going to zippy do the cam gears loose. I'm surprised it didn't shatter. So we can probably walk these out a little bit. Probably, maybe. What is happening? Well, there's the exhaust. This appears to be in a... It wasn't a button. Hey, that's not supposed to happen. Where's the rest of it? And that's gone. Okay, I'm going to attempt to get the timing cassette out. I make no promises because there's nothing to grab it by anymore. Let's get blue on this task. I don't know if blue's going to fit in there. Oh yeah. Oh no. Well, there's a piece of a part of it. Oh, there's many more pieces in here. Yeah, that's part of it. Oh, there's a lot more. This is almost impossible. I might have a tool for this. Oh, yes. So that's another part of it. Is there more? Oh, for sure. There we are. Is there anything else? Oh, yes. It's the gift that keeps on giving. There we are. It's Billy Mays here. But wait, there's more. See, there is more. I'm not joking. I gotta be running out soon. Yeah, I don't think I can get to anything. Oh, there's another piece. A little guy. Still counts. I think that's... Oh no, there's more in there. Got it. We gotta be close to the end. Yeah, I don't see any... Oh, nope, there's more in there. I had to say something. I think that's the last piece that I can get out at least. The remains of the timing cassette are nearly unidentifiable. If it wasn't for the part number and its close proximity to where it originally came from, we wouldn't have a positive ID. But it is deceased. Now we can start working on the cylinder head. We'll start with these. Now this is a Valvetronic engine, which I've covered many times on this channel before. This is the Valvetronic system right here. Here's the motor. And I'm not going to take this apart because there's no real need to take this stuff apart. But I am going to remove the exhaust cam so we can take a look at the journal condition. First, we need to remove this oil supply line once I have the right size socket. Now it's time to cram the cam caps off. So the cam journals don't look perfect. They're not super torn up, and I don't see any issues with any of the valve train on this side of the cylinder head. The caps definitely have more wear than the journals, and that's strictly due to the tension of the springs. These usually show wear first. You can see there's been some debris run through here. And then when we go onto the camshaft, it actually doesn't look too terrible. It's not perfect. I think most of its damage will polish out, but it also has some pitting from moisture on it. Next, we have a little bit of housekeeping. Before we start on the head bolts, there are some bolts around the perimeter of the engine that hold the head to the block. Let's get those loose. The next thing I need to do is remove this oil supply line for the Valvetronic gear. Now, I've definitely covered this before in other videos, but in order to get access to all the head bolts, I can get access to most, but as you can see, the eccentric shaft for the Valvetronic system is in the way. It inhibits access. So I've got the tool here to turn the Valvetronic gear. Oh, that's cool. And we just passed the position I need. So we're just going to, look at that right there. And then I need to remove one of the stops right there. And I should have access to all of the head bolts. Now it's time to get the head bolts loose. See if I have the right combination of socketry. All right, now the eccentric shaft did move a little, but I don't think it's going to be a big problem. Another thing worth noting, the bolts on the corners are T55s. The bolts, the 6 bolts on the center are T60s, which is fun. A lot of fun to get in to the tight spots. Because of the close proximity to the valve train, the Valvetronic system, I'm not going to use my air impact if I can avoid it. I might not be able to avoid it. Aware, I'm just going to fill myself up with care and it'll be fine. Okay, now we need to retrieve all the head bolts. Nope. Can I have the head bolt, please? Everything's magnetic. All right, let's see if we can pull this out. Now we're about ready to lift the head. So what do you think we're going to find? And did I get all the bolts? Two very good questions. Well, we're off to a better start than the last two. The head gasket looks pretty decent. Now it's time for some science. Of course, can't go without science. That's just rocking in the bore, it's okay. I think we got a perfect score. No disconnecting rods. Let's take a look at this thing. So I am pleased to see that I don't see any valve to piston contact marks on the tops of the pistons. This all looks really good. There's some vertical wear, but it's not terrible. We'll have to wipe this out to see what this looks like a little better. Lots of dust and debris, probably from pulling the injectors. It doesn't look too terrible. And the cylinder head looks good too. I'm so happy right now. The last two of these I tore down, the heads were trash. I don't see any cracks. Obviously, I'll need to run it through the parts wash. But the other ones, the cracks were very apparent right away. And these, I don't see any situation where I would think this overheated. It looks good. Now that the head's off, the rest of this is just gravy cake. So let's turn this thing over. We'll drain whatever goo's on the inside, and we'll pull the oil pan. There might be some timing stuff that falls out of it too. You never know. Oh yeah, it just puked out a piece of timing guide. I knew we'd see some of that. The oil pan is another very good selling part of these engines if it's not terribly damaged, which it does look pretty good. I don't see any cracks or major damage in it. They usually get damage right around here, right around the drain bolt. Looks like it still has threads, so that's a plus. Now it's time to pull all these bolts out. These usually pop up pretty easily. Oh, we're dropping guides. That doesn't go there. Oh, hey. That's a terrible place to store those. You guys knew this was going to look like this, right? Look at all them guide chunkies. I don't see a lot of silvery stuff. But this is not what you want to find in the pan of one of these. There's some also very chunky, I don't know if that's going to be plastic. I don't know what that's going to be. I'm going to grab a magnet and see if that's magnetic. Nope. So I'm going to go with, it's likely plastic, or it could be, I guess it could be bearing material. But I would think we would have found a bunch of that in the oil filter, which we did not. You know, it's been a long time since we've seen a pan filled with timing guide. And anytime you're at a slouch for an oil pan filled with timing guides, you can always rely on a BMW engine to get you up to date. Yikes. But nothing's more yikes than this. This is the sump pickup. This is what draws in oil that feeds oil pressure to the rest of the engine. And what's interesting is that plastic floats. At least it gets easily suspended in the oil, so of course it makes its way into the sump, and that looks jam-packed. Now it's time to remove the pickup. That was probably full of oil because oil couldn't go either direction. Couldn't get through it, couldn't come out of it. Well, let's see how much disfigured timing guide components come out of this. What else is going to be in here? What is that? It looks fibrous. I bet that's munched up timing guide. All of this stuff is not really conducive to maintaining oil pressure. It's almost like the whole thing was plugged up. Yuck. We're going to buzz this out of here. Now what? I don't remember what I did last time. I think I just, uh-oh, it's shooting parts out. There, that looks perfect. There's the lower guide. This looks like it's intact. And in case you missed it, here's more timing guide. It's everywhere you look. We could put this back together. The next part we need to remove is the balance cartridge, which has the oil pump built into the back side of it. Now, this is a part that's worth quite a bit of money, but since we know that this thing was essentially sucking oil through a bunch of timing material, likely clogged up, there could be damage to it, and I don't want to sell it if it's a maybe. So we're likely going to peel the back side of it off and just take a peek. If it explodes and parts go everywhere, then that's just what happens. And then there's one T30 over here. And one T30 right here. These usually don't take a whole lot of effort to remove. Unless, of course, you're in the car. So I'm really hopeful this is going to be okay because we didn't see a bunch of metal in the oil filter. Did I get them all? I think I did. Whoa there. Almost lost it. Could have been bad. I don't know if I can get this apart. This does not feel good. This is really tight, but it could be because this part might be in a bind. Oh, it's just the spring came out. Okay, now it spins pretty good, so it must have just been in a bind. That spring is pretty easy to go back where it needs to go once I figure that out. Let's get this sprayed off so we can take a look at its condition. Had a lot of messy teardowns lately. So the oil pump itself doesn't really look too bad. There's not a lot of grooves and scratches in it. I don't really want to pull any of these apart. I really don't. Now the outer housing shows a little wear, but I'm not really that concerned about it. And there's the balance cartridge. I think I could put this back together and it would be just fine if I could put it back together. Well, now we can try to turn over the engine and see how that goes. Seems to be in pretty decent shape so far. We're going to put this right there and we're going to get all the rods and pistons out of the short block now. We're going to start with 1 and 4. Let's turn it over. We'll do 2 and 3. Came right out. This one I need a little help with. Now it's time to remove the bed plate so we can get the crank out. Oh, there's a piece of timing guide in the way. Of course there is. There's another piece. It's fine. And the final series of bolts. I knew that was going to happen. I thought there's no way that compressor's going to not turn on during a teardown. Now we need old blue to get this thing split. It's going to be a little challenging because of how it's bolted to the engine stand. Don't really want to have to loosen that up, but we may have to. I didn't miss a bolt, did I? Sure doesn't look like it. Yep. I'm going to unbolt this arm right here from the stand. It's going to be fine. Just don't look at it. If you don't look at it, you can't know it's a problem. See, it barely flinched. Let's do this one too. There, now we bought us a little space. That might be all the difference we need. What am I missing? Oh, apparently I just have to get the right spot. I've heard that before. Push the crank seal forward, rear main seal. And the crank is out. Let's start out looking at these rod bearings. Top shell has significant wear. but it's just wear. There's some wear on the bottom as well. There's the only bit of actual damage I see. Like some piece of debris must have made it through there. I really wish I knew the miles on this, but who knows? Maybe I'll be able to pull it off the DME. Now, let's look at the rods. So the rods all look good, but the pistons, they are really grungy. Lots of carbon. I bet this thing was just putting around, not driven super hard, using the cheapest gasoline possible, 15,000 mile or worse oil changes. That being said, the fact that the rings are pretty freed up in the ringland is pretty impressive. I don't see any cracks. There's no real damage. There's not a lot of skirt wear either. Some of the coating is gone, but that's it. These look just really, 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 really dirty. I think these will clean up, and they do have some value, which is nice. The main bearings show some faint signs of wear, but for all the junk in the sump, I'm pretty happy with this. And of course, because those look good, we go to the crankshaft, and all of this looks really nice. This was a very lucrative core. I'm glad I picked it. Pretty much all of these parts I am out of stock until now. So no duplicates, all fresh inventory. That's what you want to see. Let's take a peek at the bores. They're really not bad. Not a ton of wear. This is, I'm going to go out on a limb and say the nicest. God, that's hard to say when you consider the condition of the inside of the engine and how much varnish there was. But this is the nicest N20 or N26 that I have seen come through here. Almost everything is sellable. Of course, chain guides have perished. I would bet that those of you who work on these cars on a regular basis have seen this exact scenario over and over and over again. And I think it's totally fair to judge these engines by this type of failure. In fact, this is the common failure for one of these engines. Cracked cylinder heads like the other two I've torn down. I'm not going to say that doesn't happen. Clearly, it's happened twice here. But that's usually not what happens. What normally happens is the guides fall apart because BMW screwed the pooch, suggested a 15,000 mile oil change interval. And of course, people are of the mindset that you can stretch it just a little bit, pinch those pennies a little bit further. And ultimately, it costs them a ton of aggravation and money. And now, the majority of people who know anything about cars, at least these type of cars, say stay away from these engines, avoid at all costs. Now, had BMW suggested a 7,500 mile or less oil change interval on these engines, these might be great. These might not have had anywhere near the type of failures that we've seen, but we'll never know. Now, that doesn't mean that all of these engines that are out there are terrible and they're all going to blow up, because there's a good chance that some of them that are out there have had their oil change every 5,000 to 6,000 miles, which is what I would suggest on them, and haven't gone the suggested 15,000 miles or more. However, finding one of those is going to be tough, which is why I never tell people buying a car with an N20, specifically an early one, is a good idea. Avoid, 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 unless you have impeccable maintenance history. Now, I have heard that BMW have since dialed back the oil change interval to 10,000 miles, which that's better. We're in the right direction. I just feel like they pinch pennies and now everyone thinks these things are junk, and most of them are at this point. This engine was great for us as a business. This was great. This has a ton of really sellable parts. The only thing that was ruined was stuff that I would never, ever, ever sell anyway. The rest of it, I mean, the turbo's not the greatest, but I never really like selling used turbos unless they're as a core. So I've got plenty of good parts to sell. If you want to buy any of the parts out of this engine or anything else I've torn down, you can go to Importapart.com and peruse our inventory. I've been uploading our parts cards every single week. If you find something on our website that you can add to your cart and you want to save 10%, You can use the code IDOCARS, saves 10% site-wide on anything you can add to your cart. I really hope you enjoyed this video. As always, I love all the comments, all the feedback, and even the criticism. I love it all, and I'll catch you on the next one. And N52s are so much better.